Benvenuti di nuovo, siamo qui con Marco Giacobbi, psicologo psicoterapeuta, ma soprattutto con Dylan Selterman, che è un professore associato alla Johns Hopkins University, fa ricerca e insegna tutto ciò che riguarda il tradimento. Quindi abbiamo questa grande occasione, noi come psicologi che si occupano di coppie abbiamo afferrato questa occasione per portare un po' l'idea della ricerca nella psicologia del tradimento qui in Italia. Allora, welcome Dylan.
Good to be here. Thanks.
So first question for Dylan. How will you define infidelity? Your definition.
It's a good question. I think the definition has changed, and there's many ways to define infidelity. You could define it as having sex or physical interactions with someone who's not your partner, or falling in love with someone who's not your partner. It could be something else, like, for example, some people would consider it cheating or infidelity to use pornography or to fantasize excessively about another person. So I think infidelity in a broad sense is breaking some kind of rule that couples have about who they can and cannot engage with.
What if they didn't agree on the rule?
Well, that is a problem for the relationship, and the
Yeah.
research shows that many couples do not agree. If there was an agreement, then sometimes
There's no
sometimes
agreement.
sometimes there's disagreement about whether or not they had a, an agreement in the first place, but sometimes there's also disagreement about whether one of them was unfaithful or was committed infidelity.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it interesting because usually it happens in couples that they come and one partner says, "You you betrayed me," and the other says, "No, I didn't." But they didn't have any kind of agreement. So that's why in our practices we're suggesting, okay, guys, you come with an agreement. Okay, find an agreement on what each of you considers betrayal.
Yes.
It usually happens with pornography when one of
Oh, yes.
one.
Yes.
Yes, it's kind of quite common, I found. I will go to the next question, actually. I wanted to ask you, are there psychological patterns or traits that make some individuals more likely to engage in infidelity?
Yes, good question. There's some research to suggest that when people feel emotionally distant from partners all the time, we would call that avoidant attachment style. This can make a person more likely to cheat. There's also a personality trait that I've studied called sociosexuality. This is the way in which people think about love and sex as different things, and they are also more likely to engage in infidelity.
Mm.
And there's probably other personality traits that are generally relevant, not just for relationships, but for other things too. Like, for example, sensation seeking, then the thrill seeking.
Hmm.
So when a person is seeking thrills all the time, they might also be more prone to infidelity in relationships.
What about the personality trait that you mentioned? Never heard about that. Uh, can you elaborate on it?
Sociosexuality, yes.
Yeah.
So people fall on a spectrum in terms of how they think about love and sex, whether they think of them as totally one and the same, or totally separate, or
Mhm.
somewhere in between. And so people who have a what's called a restricted orientation, they think of sex and love as going very much hand in hand, and they feel comfortable having sex mainly or only with people that they are emotionally connected to. And then on the other side, you have people who are unrestricted, and they feel very comfortable having lots of sexual partners that they are not emotionally attached to. And so this trait tends to correlate with attitudes toward infidelity and just attitudes toward having multiple sex partners in general.
Interesting. So now, another question. Did you have you developed a questionnaire or something that can somehow, uh, I don't know, measure the tendency to infidelity?
Well, we ask people in our studies, we ask lots of different kinds of questions. Sometimes we ask about people's motivations to have an affair. So we'll ask them, why do you want to have an affair? And by the way, we only know about the people who are willing to tell us about their affairs. We don't
Yeah.
know anything about the people who are keeping it a secret from us. But the questions will be something like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to have an affair? And we also ask questions about people's relationships. So we ask them how satisfied they are. And then we ask about personality traits like the ones that we talked about. So for sociosexuality, we might ask, how many times have you fantasized about people or wanted to have sex with people? How many sexual partners have you actually had? And attitudes toward love and sex.
Oh, but you don't have like an instrument, a questionnaire that is like with it measures the tendency of a person, the proneness of a person to cheat on
Mm,
the partner, like
yeah.
made for with that purpose. That would be great, you know.
That is an interesting question. It maybe somebody else has created a questionnaire like that. I have never used that as a questionnaire in my own research.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Do you have any information about research about the correlation of religiosity
Hmm.
and infidelity? Because it would be interesting.
Other studies have shown that people who are highly religious will say that they are less likely to have affairs. But it does depend on the religion, and some religions will allow for multiple partners.
Mm,
And so, in that situation, we would not expect to see a correlation there. But with something like Christianity or Catholicism, the more religious people tend to say that they are less likely to cheat. Although, if we're including pornography, then in that case, we do see that in the very religious places, for example, in America, the red states with more conservative and more socially religious people, that they also have high rates of pornography usage there.
Interesting.
It's interesting because I've found many patients who are engaged in church activity, let's say, but that's actually probably an environment that offers the chance of meeting many other people. So that's
Hmm,
also something that we should consider. Maybe I don't.
true.
In your studies, you challenge the deficit model of infidelity. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So the deficit model of infidelity is about this idea that whenever people cheat, it's because there's something wrong in the relationship. Maybe the relationship is unsatisfying, or the people aren't communicating well with their partners, or there's a lack of love, or people think that, there's lots of conflict, something bad happening. And I think that's true sometimes. I think sometimes people do have affairs because there's something bad happening in the relationship, but not always. Sometimes people have affairs even when the relationship is going well, even when they say that they feel satisfied, even when they love their partners, even when they're committed, even when they're satisfied. So I think my challenge to the deficit model is to say it's incomplete, that it tells us something, but it doesn't give us the whole picture. The whole picture includes people who are doing well in their relationships but choose to have affairs anyway.
Yeah, from a clinical point of view, I think that anyway that the majority of people that are cheating are like unsatisfied with their relationship. Majority, not all of them. Some of them are just satisfied and just mostly it's like people that want to have just sex. Like I want to have sex and so I go with a prostitute or with that man just because of the fun of it or just because of the pleasure that comes from it. So
Yep, exactly.
Let me ask you, what is the we are very interested in this because we face this every day in our practice. So, what would you say is the best way for someone who has been unfaithful yet remains emotionally attached to their partner, to their affair partner, let's call it like that, to get back on track, to get back with their
Yes.
relationship?
Great question. I think it depends on why they were having the affair in the first place. And if the affair is because of some underlying problem in the relationship, then maybe that needs to be addressed. So maybe people felt they were growing apart from their partners, and that's why they wanted to have an affair. In which case, the solution would be work on intimacy. Or maybe they were having too much conflict, in which case, learn some good communication strategy. If there is not an underlying problem in the relationship, then I think it would be good for couples to talk about that and say to each other, listen, we're still in love and we're still care about each other. And if it is something they want to agree on, not to do that, not to have affairs, then maybe there's another type of change that would need to be made in order to keep the relationship satisfying. And this is, I think, similar to a lot of the things that folks like Esther Perel have talked about. The idea that excitement in relationships can sometimes not be there if you're getting used to seeing the same person every day for long, long periods of time. So maybe the solution is to work on making the relationship exciting and fun and thrilling again as it was when the people were first going out.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the issue that we have when there's a person that goes out from the relationship is that that person starts loving the lover. Therefore, it's difficult to go back. That's the difficult part. From l- reasoning point of view, the person understands that the right thing to do is not to go to the guy 20 years younger than her, and this is from the cortex point of view, but it's so difficult for her to let the lover go. So in this case, what would you suggest is the best way to deal with this new attachment for the new person, to extinguish the new attachment and to go back to the old partner?
Yeah,
I
and
know
also
I'm asking
Yeah,
a difficult question, okay?
they,
Because this is
they
yeah, yeah,
usually don't want to tell their partner, of course, like the official
yeah,
partner.
yeah. Um, hmm. Well, I mean, I guess one perspective would be to say you should tell the partner. You should disclose and confess and come to terms with it. But I understand why someone would not want to do that. This might be a better question for a clinician than a researcher, mainly because I don't think there's much research on how to do that.
Yeah,
And part of the problem might be that when people are having affairs, they don't necessarily see a way to do what you're suggesting. They might say, well, now that I've had an affair, I've caused damage and it cannot be repaired, and I, can't be the person that I was, that kind of. And so I think maybe we can draw on some other lines of research that don't have to do with infidelity, but have to do with finding a path forward with positive change. And the first step is to believe that it's possible to have positive change, to think I can be a better person, I can be loyal to my partner, and I can grow in a positive direction. And just thinking along those lines might be very helpful.
so I changed a bit the question, okay? What's the most effective way, in your opinion, to stop a romantic relationship? When you're in love, okay, and you have a romantic love, it's at the beginning, so it's very passionate, it's very powerful. What's in your idea, in your opinion, the best way to extinguish this thing?
Okay, I will give you an answer from the research that one of my mentors did. This is from Dr. Art Aaron's research, and he suggests that passionate love is very rewarding, and it's kind of like a like you would crave food or drugs or something like that. And the idea would be to replace the craving for the person with the craving for something else that is healthier.
Mm.
So
Mm.
this replacement strategy could be a way to just redirect attention away from the person that you have the passionate love with toward someone or something else, some other activity or some other person to focus attention on.
Can I just ask you what, for example, what would you use to shift the attention?
Well, yeah, yeah. So what exactly, what specifically to change? Um, I mean, it could be another person. It could be a friend or platonic relationship. It could be work, career. It could be hobbies, other kinds of anything to capture your motivation and your attention away from the other person. It's a kind of a displacement mechanism.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, very
I
difficult
mean,
to imagine.
ideally it's the partner
Yeah,
you've
the
committed
old.
to.
Yeah, I know.
Ideally it's the your spouse, but I understand it may not be.
So I'd like to ask you if in your studies, have you found certain coping strategies to be more effective than others when dealing with the aftermath of infidelity?
Yeah, good question. In my research, we have not looked at coping strategies specifically because what we have looked at is more the psychological experience of having an affair, but not necessarily the aftermath. I think in some cases, if you look at the other research on coping, there there's some research to suggest that it's good to think about finding meaning in events and actions.
Mm.
So, a person who has had an affair might say to themselves, well, let me see if I can figure out why I did this and then use that knowledge, use that insight to move forward and in a positive way. For someone has been cheated on, for someone who is the other partner in the affair dynamic, um, they, I think, have a much more difficult task of trying to cope with those feelings. And this is where I think someone like me would suggest that people try therapy and consult with folks like you who are
Hmm.
helping them to process emotions and to have a healthier mindset. I think one of the ways that coping has been shown to be effective is with doing journaling. So writing down feelings and trying to formulate a story of what happened, trying to figure out, well, what exactly is happening here? Who are the people that are involved that I care about? And how was I feeling during these moments? And trying to craft a story that can be written down.
I'm always very careful though when we look behind the reasons for behavior, because it's very dangerous because we risk to
Hmm.
come up with something and it's most likely wrong. But of course, if it's useful, it is an adaptive, let's say, answer
Yes.
could work. Yes.
So, how does the discovery of an affair impact the trust in a relationship? And is it possible to rebuild it?
Yes. It has a very negative impact on trust to discover an affair. And sometimes people will wonder, if they lied about this, what else are they lying about? Could be they're lying about other things that are important, maybe money, maybe parenting, maybe their job. And establishing and reestablishing trust is a long process. I think people need to be patient and
also needs to be comfortable with the idea that they're never going to have full access to what is inside their partner's mind. They're
Yeah.
never going to have a mind reading machine that will give them the full truth all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need to be comfortable with this idea and not necessarily go around looking through their partner's clothes and their phone and trying to spy on them all the time, because that's not healthy either.
Is it possible to rebuild the trust, in your opinion?
Yes, possible and difficult. I think monogamy is difficult. It is being exclusive with one person for a long time is difficult, but it is possible. Yes.
So I guess I have the hardest question now. So could you summarize your findings on the reasons behind infidelity?
The reasons for infidelity, I mean, we have discovered some, but there's likely a lot more out there that we have not studied. And we wrote that actually in some of our papers, that we want more research to get all of the reasons, not just the ones that we found, but others as well. Sometimes people cheat because they're angry at their partners for something unrelated, or maybe their partners cheated on them and they're trying to get revenge. Sometimes people are emotionally distant from their partners. They feel a lack of love. Sometimes they feel neglected. Sometimes they feel that they're just unsatisfied with the sex in the relationship. Sometimes people cheat because of something that is part of the situation that they're in that is more temporary. So sometimes people might be stressed out or intoxicated, and maybe they're on vacation. They are not in their usual state of mind. Sometimes people cheat because they want greater variety of sexual partners. And sometimes people cheat because they want to have more autonomy and independence and self-esteem, that there's a craving for additional freedom. And like I said, there's probably other motivations as
So
well. But
lots
those
of
are some of the
reasons
ones.
in the end.
Yes, lots of
Lots of
reasons.
reasons. So do you think that the different genders perceive and react differently?
Very good question. That there's a lot of debates and disagreement amongst the scientists in this area. Some people believe that men are more upset when their female partners are having sex, and women are more upset when their male partners are falling in love with somebody else. And there is some evidence for this, although some evidence does not.
Evolutionary, I think talking
Yes.
is like, it makes sense, right? So
Yes. So there's disagreement about this, and I think there's not a consensus necessarily that this is happening, but some people believe that it is. But in my research, we also find that women are more likely to want to have an affair if there's some emotional neglect that they're feeling, whereas men are more likely to want to have an affair if they want a greater variety of sexual partners. So in that sense, we do see a gender difference in my samples. And I will also add that in my most recent publication, based on the data from Ashley Madison, we had overwhelmingly large numbers of men. 85 to 90% of our sample was men. And so we were not able to run the comparisons between men and women because there were so few.
Okay.
It was on Ashley Madison website users.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's
So who's saying that the evolutionary explained theory is not correct? You said there's some arguing among scientists. What arguments do they have to say that is not correct? Because to me, that is the one that makes more sense. So I'm curious.
Yeah. There's a few ideas that challenge the evolutionary notion. One of them is that we are not measuring these variables correctly in terms of the way we ask the questions. And so if you ask people, for example, would it be more distressing if your partner fell in love with someone else or if they had sex with somebody else? Well, a lot of the time that both happen at the same time.
Yeah.
So you have a difficult measurement question, which is, how do you really know which element is the thing that is more distressing? The other objection to this line of research is about the ways in which we have societal norms and standards that are very like the sexual double standard, that it is more socially unacceptable for women
For
to have lots of sexual affairs compared to men. And the idea is that if this were to be, if we were to have a different social norm in society, then we would not see those results.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Thanks.
Something interesting will be to talk about the role of technology and social media in fidelity, because now it's like, wow.
Yeah. The good question. I think the new technologies definitely help people to make connections. And sometimes that means making the connection to someone who's not your partner. And the websites like Ashley Madison are facilitating this. And people meet on Tinder and other dating apps as well. They might meet on social media. They might meet on, Instagram or Snapchat. And so it just makes it easier for people to make connections and to facilitate those kinds of to facilitate affairs, essentially.
It's also something I noticed, because I am in the weird position. Often I'm in this weird position of helping people who had an affair to forget about their lover, let's say. So that's something that is really hard to do, is to stop following them on social media, stop stalking them, stop checking on the, when did they last connect.
Yeah. And some of my colleagues who study relationship breakups will say you can take a break from social media for a little while. You don't have to get off permanently, but just for a little bit, and unfollow the other person, remove them as a friend or a contact, and this will make it easier to move on.
Yeah, but something I noticed that's really common is that there is a real obsession about it, like also with actual compulsions. I have some clients who tend to check the last time that someone connected on
Was
Teams,
online.
for example, Microsoft Teams, every 5 to 10 minutes, and they cannot stop.
Yeah. And those kinds of compulsions were happening for people even before these new technologies were invented. When in the days of landline phones, and people might, go on the street near the home of their lover or the former lover. And yes, this is a big problem, and it's always been a problem, I think.
It's like an addiction, I guess. I think it
Yes.
has the same mechanism. So,
I agree.
can you share your thoughts on the concept of open relationships as an alternative to infidelity?
Yeah, I love this question. Some of my colleagues and I have been, aside from these studies on infidelity, we've also been publishing research on open relationships. And we find in our research that they really can work. And they work when people are mutually enthusiastic about them. So both partners are saying to each other, we love each other, and we also want to explore sex and relationships with other people. And there's an agreement, and there's open communication about it. And that way people have, there's more honesty, there's more openness, and in some cases also more excitement. There are challenges too, though. especially in terms of the arrangement where people have multiple simultaneous relationship partners. You have to make time for them. And there's only so many hours in the day, right? There's only so much energy that people have to devote to their lovers. But we know that these relationships work in other contexts. We know that people have multiple siblings that they love equally and friends that they're close with. So why not with romantic partners too? It can work.
You think can they be in love romantically with two partners at the same time, or you have one partner that is like older, so it's another kind of love, and the new one is like a romantic one?
Both. I
Both.
think sometimes you have the, like you said, the partner that you've been with for a long time, and maybe it's not as passionate, and then you have a new lover that's more passionate. But sometimes you can have a relationship where it's very passionate, and then another one that's very passionate. And I think it does depend on the specifics of those relationships and those people in them, because sometimes some people are more excited about the idea of multiple partners, and so that they kind of feed off the energy of both of those people at the same time.
How long do you think, I mean, did you measure the length of such an open relationship on average?
Well, they tend to, so the primary relationships tends to be pretty stable, just as much as for couples that are monogamous.
Wow.
And we know this based on following people over time to see if they break up or if they divorce. And
So you
they're
had a
pretty stable.
longitudinal study in time, in years you did it.
So my research did not focus on longitude. Other researchers have looked at that, though.
Very interesting, surprising actually.
Yeah, that would be interesting to study the role of jealousy, the feeling of jealousy in this couple, in these relationships.
Yes.
You see, I tend to associate it with couple, but sometimes it's not.
Yes.
Do you have any information on that? Just out of curiosity.
Great question. So people who have open relationships tend to have less jealousy than people in monogamous relationships. And what is interesting to me is the strategies that people use to reduce the negative feelings of jealousy in an open relationship. And there is something called compersion, which is a term in English that refers to the opposite of jealousy. It's when you see your partner with another person and you feel excited, you feel glad, you feel energized by this. And people tend to feel better about their partner's relationships with others if they are connected to those other people. So if they feel close to the other people that their partner is engaging with, they feel better. They feel less jealousy.
Interesting.
I'm so sorry there are no such. It's not so common in Italy, because I'm so curious to have one of these, triads or wherever as a patient. I really want to know how this works. I'm so interested, and I will be so.
Maybe they're so successful that we don't see them. That's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dylan, for being here with us, and I hope we'll see you soon. Next time, next cheating session. I don't know.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.